Hello, my name is Nifty Nomi and welcome to my live action bookkeeping video. This is video number 5 in the Grand Gate Gardens case study, and this video covers the 4th week of April, that is April 19th to 25th, 2025. Check out the link below to download the documents, request a topic, or find out more about my case study project. Now, on to the bookkeeping. So this is week number 4 of April 2025, and here's the documents that you can download. I'm going to start with the bank feeds, and there's 2 files. There's the CSV ones and the QBO files. This is the QBO download from the bank QBO file, not an actual QBO bookkeeping file, but the bank feed download. And I'm going to open that one up, and we'll see that there's actually only one feed. There's not actually much going on through the feeds for this week. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to go to Transactions, Bank Transactions. And I'm going to drop down and say Upload from File, drag this over and say Continue. And this is the Canada Bank Checking. Continue and done. So as I said, there's not much going on. We have one deposit. Now, the way that I do bookkeeping is I enter the source documents first, then I come over to the bank feed and match and solve the things that aren't already entered. So bringing back over the download folder, we can see that there's week 4 with notes and week 4 with no notes. They're exactly the same documents in both, just one happens to have little Nomi notes on there to help you out. So let's open this one up, and we'll start with the bills folder, and we have a couple of them. Let's start with the glass house bill. So we've seen a quote from Glass House, but it was just a quote, so we didn't do anything with it. We just sort of filed it away in case we never got the invoice, so we knew who to call to get a copy of the invoice if we needed. What we can see here is that it was the repair of the greenhouse, the restoration of the greenhouse on the property that Sarah wants to start her Grand Gate Gardens business on. And we can see that it's $10,000 plus HST, and Sarah has noted that she paid it May 2nd with line of credit check number 001. Now, I have seen new QBO users feel like this is a very big expense, like a very big repair and maintenance expense. But when you see such an amount of money spent to increase the value of something, that actually is going to be an asset. It's going to show up on the balance sheet because Sarah is increasing the value of the property that she's renting. I know it's kind of squishy because she doesn't actually own the property. That's why we have a special fixed asset account for things like this called Leasehold Improvements as a fixed asset on the balance sheet. We're not going to see this on the profit and loss. So let's go ahead and put this in. So because the paid date is different than the bill date, and also because there's a check number to track as well, we're going to put this in as a bill. That's why I put it in the bills folder. We're going to go New Bill, and this is Glass House Limited, and the bill date is 04/25. Bill number is I781384. The due date is helpful if you're doing check runs during live bookkeeping. I'm doing after the fact bookkeeping, or if you want to do certain reports to show the payables as of a certain date. Again, more for a live in-house office management application, not really for after the fact bookkeeping. This doesn't affect the general ledger at all. So we're just going to leave that. And the category, as I said, is leasehold improvements. You can see here that it's a fixed asset. We're not putting this to repairs and maintenance. Now, whenever you put in an asset, that's when you need to put in the description. Because when we go ahead and look at the general ledger listing of all the asset purchases, having the description in there is extremely important. So let's see if we can cut and paste right from here. Maybe. Oh, yes, we can. Control C, Control V, excellent. Another thing that I like to do is I also like to add the purchase paperwork right into as an attachment whenever there's an asset purchase or a loan or anything. So let's pull this over, and I just dragging this over from the folder I had open. And the amount was $10,000 plus HST. Like this. This is exclusive of tax, so I put the pre-tax amount there. There's $11,300. Excellent. And notice Sarah put a note here. She paid it May 2nd with the line of credit, check number 001. So we can see that right now there's no pay button until I hit save. But because it's a bill, as soon as I hit save, now the make payment button does show up, and I can go ahead and make sure that it says that payment account is CIBT line of credit. That's the only line of credit that we have set up right now in this case study, and it is check number 001. And she's paying the full amount, so we can just check that off. So the full amount's getting paid, save and close. Let's see what's next. Next, we have a Chocoholics bill. So this is a bill from a company called Chocoholics Nominous. Yes, I made that name up and I'm quite proud of it. Thank you. And so we can see that Sarah's put a note here that this is for the gift shop. Remember, she has a gift shop as well on her greenhouse nursery property that she's renting. And she put the note here that this is for the gift shop. So it's going to be sold in the gift shop. So that means that this would be technically inventory, right? We're increasing what we have, and the balance sheet is what we have and what we owe. And the way the inventory works is when you buy it and it goes into inventory on the balance sheet, then when it's sold, the cost of it moves over to the profit and loss under cost of goods sold. That's what happens, especially in larger operations. But Sarah is just a small business, and the inventory tracking on QuickBooks Online isn't quite as robust as what she needs to track her inventory in real life. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this directly against cost of goods sold on the profit and loss. And then at the end of the year, Sarah is keeping track of her inventory. She'll let us know what the inventory is, and then we can do an adjustment or let the accountant know to do the adjustment to decrease cost of goods sold and increase inventory as of the end of the year. So that's usually the way that smaller businesses track the bookkeeping for these sort of things. Though as they get larger, they may want to consider integrating some inventory software to show actually what you have until it's sold, and that's when it becomes cost of goods sold. So having said all of that, let's go ahead and put this in. Move it over, and we're going to say new bill. This is Chocoholics Nominous. So fun to say. And the invoice number is, there it is. So that's April 25th, and then the bill number is D7154. And I'm just going to put here purchases, retail, COGS, cost of goods sold, as we discussed. And we don't need to put a description here. This says exclusive, there's exclusive. So let's the pre-tax amount, so 326.03 with HST for a total of 368.41, not 40. So here's an opportunity to let you know that we can actually just change what the HST says in the box. And make sure it's the last thing you change, though. Sometimes something that you do within the entry might trigger QuickBooks to reevaluate 13% on 32603. So just make sure that's the last thing that you change. And we're just going to hit, well, we can do save and close because I don't think she put a note on how she paid this. So we'll just have it in as an unpaid bill, save and close. And that is it. We only have the two bills here. So let's go back, and there are some invoices. There's only two invoices. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so this is Chris P. Bacon, and we have a payment note on here. So let's go ahead and put this one in. So we're going to go new invoice. Chris P. Bacon. Just going to add it on the fly here, save. And then the invoice date was April 20th. Like that. And we can see the next invoice number is 1002, 1002, excellent. And it was garden installation and design. Now we've already added this product and service in last week's bookkeeping, so feel free to jump back there to find out more about that. But reminder, this product service that we added is actually pointing to the general ledger account landscaping income. So every time we use this product or service, landscaping income is going to increase by, in this case, 1,000. And it's done the HST. It looks kind of funky. I can make it bigger like that. There we go. This is what it usually looks like. And we're just going to hit save. And let's go over here. And there's a payment note right here. Paid April 20th for $1,130, check number 734. At this point in the case study, I want to pause to discuss the most common and effectual error I see when cleaning up QBO bookkeeping files that have gone wildly wrong. Again, this is because QBO combines two different methodologies of bookkeeping. Entry-based bookkeeping, I also refer to this as entry-centric, and transaction-based bookkeeping. I also refer to this as bank feed-centric. Because the bank feed feels deceptively simple, it can guide users to enter incorrect entries that can inflate revenues and taxes payable. So this section of the case study guidance I would consider the most important for all new QBO users to watch. First, let's take a look again at the bank deposit screen. Going to go to New, Bank Deposit. Now, there are two ways to add a bank deposit transaction into QBO. I call this way right here the big screen way. Here we can see there's just the section add funds to this deposit. Never, ever use this add funds for sales entries, ever. You can use it for multitudes of applications, which we have and will continue to cover, but never for sales income. Now I'm going to sneak a peek at a deposit slip that we're going to have coming up soon. So in the deposit section, here's the deposit slip. Notice that there are two payments going into the bank together and at a later date than client Chris paid. This is what I would call a combined deposit, a combination of items going in together. Also, Chris paid on the 19th, but that's not deposited until April 25th. So his invoice was paid on the 19th. He didn't owe anything on the 19th, but the bank did not increase. The funds were in transit. So the bank deposit screen is to always be used when there are either a combination of items going in, so a combined deposit, or if the funds are in transit over a period of time. Let's come back to this later. Let's go ahead and enter Chris's payment. So we have here paid April 20th, I thought 19th. Let's see, sorry. Let's close this bank deposit screen. There's a few different ways to enter that. One way is we can jump right back to the last thing we entered, so this invoice right here, and then we can hit the receive payment button, and we'll date it the 20th, and the reference number was, there it is, 734. And I'm going to actually say we're depositing this to undeposited funds. That's what we're going to use to do the combined deposit. This is a very special GL account in QuickBooks. So because we came to this payment screen from the invoice screen, it's actually already checked off that the invoice is paid. So all we need to do now is save and close. Now, when we go back to the bank deposit screen, so I'm just going to open up to a new bank deposit. Look, now we can see Chris's payment. Because we said that this was paid to undeposited funds, we can see that Chris's payment is here, ready to be checked off and added to a bank deposit entry. And the add funds to this deposit is still down here at the bottom, but we're actually going to be adding payments to the deposit from the checklist up here. Now on this deposit slip right here, we can see that actually Anita Bath also gave us a payment. And let's see if Anita has a bill, or sorry, an invoice for us to enter for that amount. So I'm going to close this without saving. So another way to enter a customer payment is to go new. There's many ways to do it, but here's another way. You go new, receive payment, and then we can just put Anita's name up here, Anita Bath. And it doesn't say when she paid. So we're just going to assume the 25th for now, because that's the date it went into the bank. Reference number was check number 1234. What a coincidence. Again, we're going to use undeposited funds here so that we can see it as a check to be deposited in that bank deposit screen. And we'll just check off this invoice here, say she's paying all of it, and save and close. So let's go new bank deposit. And look, now we can see both Chris's and Anita's payment available for us to check off and add to a deposit entry. And again, I see this as like having the checks sitting in the deposit book ready to go to the bank, funds in transit. Now, before we do enter this deposit though, I want to show you what this looks like from the bank feed screen. So here is the bank feed screen, and here is the branch deposit of 220350. Imagine a new QBO user who diligently creates and sends multiple invoices, and then also diligently marks them as paid. But that was last week. Over the course of the week, much more has happened, and the new bookkeeper is faced with dozens of bank feed items to match and clear. Now, even if that bookkeeper had put these as paid to the bank, both of those invoice totals don't match this deposit amount. And even though we've entered it just now such that there is actually $2,203.50 sitting in undeposited funds, it still doesn't recognize that because we haven't actually entered the bank deposit transaction, moving those two checks sitting there into the bank, and we haven't added that to QBO yet. So the new QBO user sees this deposit on the bank feed and tries to think back to last week. Who gave us money last week? Ah, yes, it was Chris Bacon. So the diligent new QBO user feels that they must clear every item in this bank feed, and their brain is focused on, what is this? When they have identified that this bank feed info line they think is actually income from Chris Bacon, the bank feed does allow for an oversimplified cash accounting, which is not applicable to the majority of small businesses. And because the new user is so focused on the bank feed and believes they can do everything from the bank feed screen, they diligently enter the revenue as if it was from Chris Bacon. So all they would need to do is just say, oh, I know, this was Chris Bacon, right? And actually that was landscaping income, they think. And yes, there was HST on that, and they can just click add. Because the user was in a bank feed-centric frame of mind, they forgot that they had entered the payments from an entry-centric method of bookkeeping. They've already put it in somewhere else, but they either don't remember or don't quite know how to marry those transactions in QuickBooks properly to the QuickBooks bank feed info line. But we've already put in the revenue from Chris. What I just did right now was put in a double entry. And I've seen this done in some very high revenue business QBO files. I'm talking $20,000 to $30,000 sales entries duplicated multiple times. This is a huge issue, especially in the duplicated HST collected. And it is probably the most common error I see new QBO users do. But wait, there's more. Because we just put in a $2,203.50 sale from Chris Bacon using the deposit screen. We just used what I call the shortcut way to put in a bank deposit. First, let's see what it looks like the big screen way. We can jump right back in again to the last thing we entered with the spyglass, and here is that bank deposit that we just entered. Here, we can see that there's 2 checks still available to be checked off, but it's important to note they are not checked off, meaning they are not part of this bank deposit entry that is married. So there's the bank feed info line that's married to the bank feed info line. And down here, we have actually used the add funds section to add landscaping income. How many times have I shown this to a new user and they never remember doing this? And it's because they added it from the bank feed the shortcut way, not knowing this is the big screen thing that they were doing. Remember when I said never use this section for sales? Well, we just did. And not only did we just double enter income, this new 2,203 sale is not even in Chris's history list, even if he did give it to us in addition to the invoice. Now, here we can see his name. Now let's go to Chris's customer history. I'm going to go to Sales, Customers, click on Chris, and all we can see is the invoice that we added and the payment that we added. It's not showing us the $2,203.50 income that we just said Chris gave us using that add funds to this deposit section of the bank deposit screen. So if by some unique situation, Chris did give the business an additional $2,203 and the business owner was to ask, hey, did Chris pay us for that add-on last month? And we were to look here at Chris's history, we'd say no. I'll let you imagine how that would play out in real life. So let me show you how we would add that bank deposit the correct way, okay? We would go New, Bank Deposit. We would confirm the bank account that it's going into, and we would confirm the date. And then all we would need to do is check off the 2 checks that are ready to go in and be deposited. Now, if petty cash was also going into the bank or a grant was going in, then that is when we could use this add funds to deposit section. And check it out. If this deposit was actually coming from Square and some Square fees were being deducted, we could go ahead and put in those Square fees right here and make it negative. So let's say negative $23.50. Was being deducted for Square fees, and you can see how that's going to reduce the amount. So you can even put negative things in here. But today it's just the 2 checks. So let's just go ahead and delete that. But I'm not going to hit save. And I'm not going to hit save because I just added that 25th deposit the wrong way. Now I could delete it, but if the bank was already reconciled, that bank feed info lines married to that transaction, and it would be a bit of a pain to fix, which we'll look at later in the course. But let me just show you a quicker way to fix it. So I'm not going to save this. I'm going to jump to that bank deposit we just added, and I can use that little clock here. It's all the most recent bank deposit entries that have just happened. And I'm just going to jump over to it. Do you want to leave without saving? Yes, we're not saving that, which means that these 2 checks are still available for deposit. They're going to always show up there as long as they haven't been clicked off or checked off on a bank deposit screen. So let's go ahead and check them off for this deposit. And look, that's doubled the amount of the deposit. So all we need to do is delete this amount that we just added in the add funds section, and the total goes back to $2,203.50. And it's still married to its bank feed info line. And all we have to do now is hit save. And you know what? I'm going to hit save and new. And now you can see that there are no longer any checks available for deposit. And that's because they have been checked off here in this bank deposit right here. I just realized when I mentioned the clock to jump to the entry we just did for a bank deposit, might have been hidden by the screen. So there's that little clock thing that shows us the most recent transactions that we've entered. Now let's continue on and see what else is in the folder. So I am just going to jump back to the invoices. There was another invoice in here that we didn't enter. And I take a look, and this is from Gymnasium. And there's no payment information, so we're just going to enter this as unpaid into the QuickBooks file. So we're going to go new, invoice. This is Gymnasium. It's not a very common last name, I don't think. And let's, usually it's a little bigger. Let's see. There it is. And that's invoice 1003. This is garden design and installation. And the total is, I'm just hitting tab to jump through the fields, is $745. Yep, plus tax. So I'll put that in, $745 plus HST, $841.85. Excellent. And now I just need to save and close. All right, what else do we have in here? Deposits. We've already put this bank deposit in. And then there's an other folder. Let's take a look. Now, what I put in the other folder for this week, I already put this in the video number 1 downloads, the March downloads, but I put it in again. And the reason I put it in again is it's to remind us that actually there should be an HST return for the first quarter of 2025. Though Sarah doesn't have to file the full quarter because she actually was not registered until March 14th. But Q1 of the calendar year ends on March 31st. So Sarah needs to file the HST from March 14th to 31st, 2025, and that is due on April 30th. And if today is April 25th, now is a good time to go ahead and file that HST. So let's go ahead. Now, there's not really much going on in this period, but I still have this GST HST filing step checklist that we're going to go through really quickly. So first of all, I just review any open questions that I might have for Sarah. Some unknowns. I usually keep a list of ongoing questions, or if I'm working for a bookkeeping firm, there's usually like a special way to manage those questions because questions are a thing. So we review the open questions and make sure there's nothing earth-shattering that needs to be resolved before we prep and file the HST. Next, we make sure that the banks and credit cards are reconciled and no uncleared transactions should be there. Now, this is interesting because so many times people feel, oh, the bank feeds, they're all cleared. I'm good to go. But the answer is no. You need to make sure that everything that's entered that should have cleared is cleared. Right? You can imagine with that double entry that we just had, if the bookkeeper had maybe marked them as paid into the bank, and then we just put in Chris again and made that even more, the bank feed would be cleared, but there would be a couple of bank payments or deposits to the bank for the Anita and Chris payments that haven't cleared. Or maybe there's a charge that's been entered twice and only one got married to the bank feed info line and the other one's uncleared. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the reconciliation screen, and I'm going to what I call crack open the reconciliation screen temporarily. So because I'm cracking it open temporarily, I just need to say 0, and then I'll just say today's date, so the 25th. And let's take a look, and we can see that everything here has a little blue check mark and is married to a green bank feed info line. So there's no uncleared double entries in the credit card. Excellent. So I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to close without saving. So we just temporarily cracked it open, and we're going to do the same thing for the Canada Bank checking. Again, I'm just going to put a 0 in there. I'm just going to say today's date, or even to the end of the period just ended. No big deal. Start reconciling. And we can actually see that there is one item that hasn't cleared yet. There is this bill payment, this check that hasn't cleared. But it's not a double entry. And it makes sense that if she popped it in the mail on April 15th, that maybe they didn't deposit it until the first or second day in May. And that hasn't happened yet in our example. So this is an example of an uncleared item that we're okay with. But you can imagine that right here, maybe there would be the 2 payments from Chris and Anita's marked paid to the bank, and they would also be white and unchecked off and unmarried, uncleared. And then we'd be like, oh, wait, that should have gone in. There's an issue. So that's why we crack open the bank reconciliation screen and make sure that all the uncleared transactions are either supposed to be there or have been resolved if they're double entries. And we're going to go ahead and close without saving. Close without saving. And usually I would do the Canada Bank Savings and the CIBT line of credit also. We're not going to do that though. I was just illustrating the steps that I do before I file the GST and HST. And what's the next step? Next step is payment clearing accounts are reconciled and confirm undeposited funds. So if we had actually entered Anita and Chris's payment to undeposited funds, we wouldn't have seen it there as an uncleared item on the bank reconciliation. So that's why before I file somebody's GST, I also go new bank deposit and just have a quick peek and make sure that there's no older undeposited checks that haven't been resolved or figured out. And the other thing that the checklist says here is the payment clearing account is reconciled. So we haven't been using a payments clearing account yet. We will be, but that's just another thing just to make sure that nothing residual is hanging out and everything is looking reasonable. Next, you would go ahead and review the unpaid bills and invoices to make sure there's no cleanup, like there's nothing weird or needing fixing. So we go to reports, and the 2 reports I would generally look at is the unpaid bills, and I'm going to star those, open invoices, and the unpaid bills, which is just up here. I'll star it. When you star it, it just sits at the top. So we're going to go open invoices, and we can see that there is, we're going to say as of the 25th, and we can see there's nothing old that needs addressing. And let's go back. And we're going to go to the unpaid bills. Same thing, there's nothing old that needs fixing or cleaning up. So what's next on the list? Review the profit and loss. And again, not much happened in March. There's not going to be much review of the profit and loss, just to make sure nothing crazy is there. But notably, does the sales on line 101 on the GST HST filing tool match the sales on the profits or loss? So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. We're going to go back to reports, and I'm going to say profit and loss. And I'm just going to go and make this quarters like this, run report. And we can see that landscaping income in this quarter is going to be 0. So we can, I'll just move this over to show. I right click, I hit duplicate, so that I can have 2 QuickBooks windows open at once. We're going to go over to taxes, sales tax, and right here I'm going to hit prepare return, and we can see that the sales and revenue is 0, so that does match. Next then on the checklist, it says to review balance sheet, and does the payable amount on line 113A on the filing tool match the GST HST payable on the balance sheet? So let's take a look. Right here, the net tax up here, line 109 is the same as line 113A because there's no installments, minus 52.75. So it's a refund. Let's see what the balance sheet says. We're going to go back to reports, and I'm going to say balance sheet. And this is very important. You want the balance sheet to be as of the period end of the GST HST being filed. So in this case, that's March 31st. Run report. And when we scroll down, we can see that the GST HST payable is indeed minus 52.75. I am going to do a video on what to do when these items are different, but this is just a quick run through. Little March had not much going on. So we also do a review, make sure nothing really jumps out or looks crazy. Pull this over. And next it says review the ITC listing. So let's go ahead. And one of the ways to get to that pretty quickly is back in the sales tax screen. I'm going to hit prepare return. And here we can see this input tax credits, ITCs. That's the HST on expenses. Businesses don't need to pay HST on their business expenses. They do at the store and then CRA gives it back to them. That's what's going on here. And we can review those just by clicking on that underline there. And here is a list of all of the ITCs for the period. Again, not much happened in March, just the one thing, and we can see it in the list right here. So what's next on my checklist here? It says review transactions without sales tax report. So what we're going to do is we find that under reports, and we can go down to the sales tax section. And right here is the report transactions without sales tax. We can run that. You want to make sure that the from date and to date cover the period that you're reviewing. I'm just leaving it for now because March didn't have anything. But then what I would do is I add a new column. I add account name. And account name, it makes sense to me. The credit card payment doesn't have HST on it, the account being Triangle MasterCard. Because you can imagine usually there's a long list here, and then I can sort by the account name and just scroll through bank charges, insurance, deposits, payroll. Excellent. None of this should have HST on it. It doesn't look like HST was missed on any HSTable transactions. Now let's take a look at what's next on our list. And it says, is GST HST collected, line 103, a reasonable amount of sales? So if there were sales in this period, I would just multiply it by 13% to see if the HST collected was 13% of the income, just to make sure everything's sort of doing what I expect it to do. Then it says export the GST HST reports to Excel. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this filing because there's literally one thing. But when we do the quarter from April to June, we'll see a more flushed out example of filing and exporting to Excel. QuickBooks does save it. It just saves it as this static PDF looking thing. And I find that having an Excel spreadsheet is something that I prefer to have on file. But we'll look at that in a few months. So let's go back to the sales tax screen. And just a note here, it's defaulted because we said quarterly to January 1st to March 31st. We can change those dates to March 14th. We don't need to because nothing happened. But one thing that I've seen happen is if you've never filed the HST in the QuickBooks file and you're doing a whole backlog of bookkeeping. Maybe the client hasn't done bookkeeping for a year and they're behind on their HST filings and you got to catch them up. And you come in and you're like, I've put stuff in for 2024. Where is it? How can I change these numbers right here? Aha. So if you wanted to say file for October to December 2024, and you come here and it's the first time ever using the GST HST filing screen, you'd be like, I want before then. Why isn't it giving me before then? It's not giving us before then because this is the most logical one that's next due as of today, April 25th. It's actually super easy to change. Let me show you how. You go to prepare return and you just change it up here, and you can just click back to October 1st, 2024, and then click on over here to December 31st, 2024. And now you can see it's gone to 0 because nothing is in this quarter. We haven't entered anything in there, but that's all you have to do. And then here, I'll even show you what it looks like. If I go ahead and I always change the filing date to the last day of the period, and I'll show you why in a moment, but let's go ahead and just mark this as filed. All done, continue. And now you can see it's down here and it's ready to do January to March again. So if you're filing GST HST for the first time and you want to get further back than what the first one offered is, you just open it and change the dates. Now, of course, now when we go to prepare this return, it's not going to let us go back any further. That's only if it's the very first time filing the GST HST return. And then we're going to make the filing date the last day of the period. And I'm going to show you why I do that in just a moment. Now, before I hit mark as filed, at this point, what we would do is would open up CRA Online, either Rep a Client or My Business Account, and would log on and we would put in these numbers while we have this screen up in QuickBooks. So it'd say sales of 0, collected of 0, and on line 106, the HST credits of $52.75. We'd hit calculate and CRA would therefore say, you get a refund of $52.75. Once we've confirmed that all our numbers match, I would hit File on CRA. Then I would come back to QuickBooks and I'd mark as filed here at exactly the same time. And the reason you need to do it at the same time is you want what QuickBooks says to be the same as what CRA says. And if somebody else were to add some other entries in here, it could mess it up and it won't match anymore. So make sure that you hit mark as filed here at the same time. Then you hit mark as filed on CRA Online. So let's go ahead, mark as filed, continue. And I don't know when the refund's coming, so we'll accept the refund later. And there we go. Now you can see that lined up is the next filing. It's only got information in for the first 4 weeks of April, but it's ready to go. And here we have marked this refund as filed. I did say I was going to show you why I dated that March 31st. Let's go over to reports. We're going to go to the balance sheet. And I'm going to make this as of March 31st, the filing date. And you can see now that the GST HST payable is now 0, and that balance has been moved over to GST HST suspense. And again, we don't use GST HST suspense directly when we get the refund. You're going to record it in the sales tax module. But let me crack this open. This is the GST HST payable transactions. And you can see that we've got just that GNOME hardware amount. And here is the filed sales tax. If we had dated this filing date on April 25th, then my balance sheet wouldn't move this refund amount as of the end of the period. And there are many reasons why I find it much more useful to see it go to 0 or see the HST sort of filing entry go on the last day of the period. We'll talk about that more when we file the April to June quarter of HST for Grand Gate Gardens. But for now, that's it. We're done. We have entered all of the April week 4 transactions and we've cleared the bank accounts and now we've filed the HST. So if you're following along at home, let me just show you as of the 4th week of April 2025, the 25th, 2025. Here's the balance sheet. So you want your balance sheet to look the same as this. And let's go over to reports, profit and loss, and let's go from March 23rd to April 25th, and let's display columns by weeks, run report. So we just entered the documents for the 4th week of April, as you can see right here. Now, I'm not going to do a full P&L review right now. That's usually something that I do at the end of the month, which is next week. So I hope you found this information helpful in the building growth and success of the business that you are working in and on. If you found this video useful, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Instagram at BeThatBusiness, and I'm at Nifty Nomi on Twitch and TikTok. And you can find out more about this case study, including downloading the documents or submitting a topic request, as well as many other resources and courses about running a Canadian business on my website, naomiwilkins.ca. I love making business make sense. The video today was filmed in beautiful Newcastle, Ontario. Thanks so much for watching, and get out there and be that business that thrives.